Story 1. The Man in the Closet. My name's Tessa, and I was 15 when it happened. It was late September, the air cooling just enough to make the evenings crisp, but warm enough that most people still left their windows cracked. I'd been babysitting for the Rowans for a couple of months by then. They had one little girl, Mia, who was 4. The house itself was small and tidy. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into the living room, and a long hallway running down the middle. It wasn't the sort of place you expected to feel unsafe in. Mrs. Rowan was covering an extra evening shift at the bookstore, and Mr. Rowan was out of town at a conference. She asked me to stay until 11 p.m. I didn't think twice. She left at 6:30, kissing Mia goodnight in advance and reminding me to lock the front door. I did, then made grilled cheese for the 2 of us. We ate in the living room while cartoons played softly. Mia giggled through mouthfuls of bread and cheese, crumbs falling into her lap. By 8:00, Mia was yawning. Bedtime was part of the deal, so I guided her to her room. She insisted her closet light stay on, just like she always did. Her mom once told me she was afraid of the dark, but never said why. I tucked her in, smoothed her hair, and left the door ajar so the light could spill out. Back in the living room, I scrolled my phone for a while. The only sounds were the faint hum of the refrigerator and a car passing now and then outside. But around 8:45, I heard something else, a faint, muffled shuffle, like fabric moving. It came from the hallway. I got up, figuring Mia had gotten out of bed, but when I peeked into her room, she was fast asleep, one arm over her stuffed rabbit. That's when I realized the sound was coming from inside her closet. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to check. Finally, I walked over, placed my hand on the door, and listened. Nothing. I slid the door open quickly. Just dresses, shirts, and a plastic bin of toys. No one there. I told myself it was the clothes swaying from air movement. Still, I checked the window. It was shut. I went back to the living room, but that uneasy feeling clung to me. At 9:10, the noise came again, this time followed by something that made my skin prickle. A faint breath. Not Mia's soft, even breathing from the bed, but a slow, deliberate exhale. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I crept back down the hall. This time I didn't hesitate. I yanked the door open wide and my stomach dropped. Behind a row of hanging clothes, in the back wall of the closet, there was a rectangular cutout, like an access panel. It was just big enough for someone to crawl through, and it was open, revealing a black void beyond. I slammed the closet door shut, scooped Mia up. She stirred, but didn't wake, and carried her to the living room. I called my mom, whispering that I needed her now. She arrived in under 5 minutes, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions until we were outside. When the police came, they found footprints in the dust on the boards behind that opening, along with an old blanket tucked in the corner of a narrow crawl space between the walls. No one was inside. They never found who it was, or how long they'd been using that space. The Rowans sealed the opening the next week, but I never babysat for them again. Even now, I check my closet before bed, not because I think someone's there, but because once there was. Story 2. The House Across the Street. I was 16, babysitting for the Grants 2 doors down from my place. Friday nights were routine: oven pizza, homework at their dining table, and lights out by 9 for Owen and Emma. Their living room always made me feel a little exposed. It had these huge picture windows that faced the street like a stage, and across from them sat the old Webster house, peeling paint, boarded side door, no curtains. The kids called it the Watcher's House. I laughed the first time, but that laugh always died early, like it ran out of air. That night, rain came in thin sheets, glistening off the streetlight. Inside, the Grants' place smelled like detergent and crayons. Owen and Emma drew astronauts at the table while I sliced apples and pretended not to glance out the window every 30 seconds. Around 8:10, Owen stopped coloring, stared out the window, and went very still. I followed his gaze and saw only rain. "He's there," he said softly. I crouched beside him. "Who?" He didn't answer, just raised his finger to the window and then, weirdly, lowered it, like pointing was against some private rule. Emma leaned into me and whispered, "Don't look too long." It was the way she said it, gentle, like advice, not fear, that made something cold pass through my chest. I got them upstairs early, partly because it was bedtime, and partly because I wanted any eyes to know the show was over. The kids brushed their teeth while I peeked at the front yard through the upstairs hallway window. The rain made the street look like a smear of mercury. Everything was empty. I tucked them in, checked their nightlight, and promised I'd be in the living room. On my way out, Owen said, "If he knocks, don't open." I smiled and told him the obvious. I wasn't opening for anyone. At 9, 7. Funny how exact times fix themselves in your memory. I muted the TV because I heard something soft and deliberate. 3 taps on glass, not on the door, on glass. The taps came again, from the big picture window. I stepped into the lamplight and immediately stepped back because there was a pale shape very close on the other side. Not a face, a hand. An open hand resting flat against the window like a child testing a fish tank. I didn't scream. Something about the openness of the gesture short-circuited fear and replaced it with calculation. I slipped behind the couch, crouched, and craned my neck to the side so I could see without being seen. The hand lingered, pressed lightly, then lifted. It had no glove. The fingers were long, and the palm had a dark crescent scar at the base of the thumb. The hand lowered out of sight, and a figure stepped back into the rain. Tall, black jacket, no hat. He didn't try the door. He didn't even peer in. He simply retreated. I dashed to the front hall, threw the deadbolt, slid the chain, and fetched the small wooden wedge the Grants kept to jam under the door. I turned off the living room lamp so the house went from aquarium bright to dim. In the reflection of the window, my own face floated over the street. Across the way, the Webster house seemed to inhale. The upstairs left window looked darker than the rest, and as my eyes adjusted, I realized why. Someone was standing there, not close enough to see details, but close enough that the darkness had a shape. The rain led up to a mist. That's when I heard the side gate clang. The Grants' side yard was latched, not locked. The sound was the latch, followed by the soft thud of the gate swinging into the hedge. I froze and listened for footsteps in the wet grass. Nothing. I went halfway up the stairs so I could see both the hallway to the kids' room and the rectangle of the kitchen doorway that framed the back door's frosted glass. A smudge moved behind it, like someone testing whether their shadow would show. The doorknob tweaked one small testing motion, then stopped, as if the person realized they were being studied. Police headlights finally washed the living room. 2 officers walked the yard with flashlights, then crossed to the Webster house. They swept their beams up to the left window and lingered there. When they came back, one told me they'd found prints in the mud leading to the Grants' gate and more on the Webster porch shoe prints with a worn right heel. No sign of anyone inside. The officers suggested blinds for the big window. The Grants got them the next day, thick and beige and almost smug-looking. Months later, a developer bought the Webster lot and tore the house down. It should have helped, but sometimes when I pass that patch of new lawn, I still feel watched. I think about the hand on the glass open, patient, and how it didn't want to break in. It wanted me to unbolt the door myself. Story 3. The static on the baby monitor. I was 17, and it was my first time with the Hearts. New build, open floor plan, and everything a common gray that looked like a furniture catalog. Their little boy, Caleb, had big eyes and the softest snore I've ever heard. He went down at 8 p.m. without a fight, clutching a stuffed giraffe.
It crackles sometimes, she said, embarrassed. It picks up interference from other houses.
The Hearts left at 8:15. I did a circuit, front door locked, back slider latched, basement door closed. The house hummed in that new construction way. Fridge, HVAC, the occasional click in the ducts like someone politely clearing their throat. I took the video monitor to the living room, set it on the coffee table, and let a cooking show play low. The screen showed Caleb's crib from the corner. White rails, dim nightlight glow, a blob of toddler in sleep pose. Every 30 seconds the image rippled, like the camera was breathing. I told myself it was compression. The hair rose on my neck the way it does when a stranger says your name in a crowd. I stood and listened long enough for my ears to invent patterns. Then I backed out and returned downstairs, humiliated by how relieved I felt to find nothing. "Just downstairs, buddy," I whispered, trying to be breezy.
"It's interference, honey," she said, but she stayed on the line while I walked the floor plan, narrating. Front door locked, sliders locked, garage doors the keypad type, basement door closed.
I haven't babysat in a house with a monitor since, and if I hear static in a store or on TV, I still catch that second syllable, the one that isn't a word at all, just someone letting me know they practiced saying my name. I've been on the road for over a decade now, and if there's one superstition I've always brushed off, it's the stories about black dogs' omens of death, they say. I never believed in that stuff. Until one cold February night outside Roanoke. I was hauling freight southbound on I-81, maybe around 2:30 a.m. Not another soul on the road. Just me, the humming of my tires, and a light fog creeping across the asphalt. I had just passed exit 9 when I saw something in my headlights. It looked like a large dog, black as night, built like a mastiff, with glowing eyes that shimmered like oil slicks. It was standing dead center in the road. I had no time to swerve. I braced for impact, but there was no thud, no bump, no resistance. I slammed the brakes, came to a hard stop, and jumped out of the cab, flashlight in hand. The road was empty. I searched both ditches, walked back 100 feet, scanned the tree line. Nothing. Not even footprints in the dew-covered grass. I chalked it up to exhaustion and climbed back in. 10 minutes later, my CB crackled. A voice came through, raspy, distant.
"You saw him, didn't you?"
I froze. "Who is this?" I asked. Static, then silence. I kept driving, more alert than ever. I didn't see the dog again, but when I pulled into a truck stop an hour later, an old-timer approached me. Said he recognized my rig.
"You were stopped at exit 9?
I nodded. "Yeah. Some kind of animal ran out." He raised a hand to stop me.
Black dog, glowing eyes?"
I hesitated. "Yeah." He looked down at the pavement, then back up at me, his expression grim.
"You need to be careful the next few days. That stretch is cursed. A lot of drivers see that thing before something bad happens."
I tried to laugh it off, but something in his eyes made me stop. 3 days later, I lost control on a mountain pass. My brakes failed on a downhill grade. I went into the runaway ramp and barely survived. Broke 3 ribs, dislocated a shoulder, totaled the rig. The mechanics couldn't find anything wrong with the brakes, said the system was fine. As I was sitting in the hospital, replaying it all in my head, I remembered the dog. how it didn't move, how it just stared, how it didn't leave a trace. I started asking around. Other truckers, locals. Turns out the legend's been around for years. They call it the Hellhound of Exit 9. Some say it's the ghost of a dog that was hit and left to die. Others believe it's something much older, a spirit that feeds off wrecks and death. I don't drive that route anymore. If I have to pass through Virginia, I take the long way. Adds 3 hours to the trip, but it's worth it, because I know what I saw. It was about 3:45 a.m. when I pulled into a remote gas station somewhere off Route 95 in Maine. I'd been pushing hard since Connecticut, and my eyes were starting to blur, so I figured I'd top off the tank and grab a coffee. The place was one of those older stations, no brand name, barely lit, one flickering bulb over the pumps. There was only one other vehicle there, an old, beat-up sedan parked at Pump 3. No one was inside it. I pulled up to Pump 1 and shut off the engine. The night air was biting cold, and a thin fog was creeping across the lot. I stepped out and noticed something right away, the silence. No wind, no bugs, not even the usual buzz of the fluorescent lights. Just dead quiet. As I started fueling, I glanced over at the sedan again. This time, there was a man standing beside it. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was tall, maybe 6'5", but rail thin. Skin pale as candle wax, wearing a tattered coat and jeans that looked decades out of date. His head was shaved, and he had these huge, hollow eyes that locked on me the second I noticed him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I felt something twist in my gut. I finished fueling and walked toward the station door to pay. As I opened it, I looked back over my shoulder. The man was now standing next to my rig. I hadn't heard him move. No footsteps. No sound at all. Inside the store, I rang the bell at the counter. No clerk, no music. The coffee machine was cold. Lights dimmed. I stood there, calling out, but nothing. I turned around to check the lot again. The man was gone. So was the sedan. I bolted back to the truck, locked the doors, and got the hell out of there. I didn't even realize I'd left without paying until I was halfway down the highway. About an hour later, I pulled into a bigger, better-lit truck stop. I asked the guy behind the counter if he knew the other station, the one off 95 with the old pumps. He gave me a strange look.
That place burned down 2 years ago. Clerk died in the fire. No one's rebuilt it.
I insisted I'd just been there. He shook his head and pulled out his phone, showed me pictures, blackened ruins, graffiti all over the pumps. I felt ice run down my spine. To this day, I don't know what I stepped into that night. A memory? A leftover echo? Or something else entirely? But I know what I saw. A pale man. At Pump 3, watching me like he'd been waiting. And I swear I still hear that gas pump click off in the middle of the night, long after I've parked, and I don't need to see it again. I was driving through the back roads of Mississippi, hauling produce on a route I don't normally take, Highway 84, somewhere between Brookhaven and Waynesboro. It was about 2 a.m., and I was the only one on the road. No headlights in either direction for miles. That's when I saw her, a woman in an orange sundress, barefoot, standing at the edge of the woods. She had long dark hair and pale skin that almost glowed in my headlights. Her dress fluttered in the breeze, and her head was tilted like she was trying to hear something. I slowed down, uneasy. I've stopped for people before, broken down drivers, hitchhikers, but something about this felt wrong. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stared at the road like she didn't know what it was. I passed her slowly, eyes on the mirror. She didn't turn to look at me. I radioed it in just in case. Possible pedestrian on 84, maybe needs help, and kept going. About 10 miles down, I saw her again. Same orange dress, same spot on the shoulder, but it couldn't have been. No one on foot could have made it that far ahead of me, not without a car or cutting through the woods. And even then, it would have taken an hour at least. I drove past, faster this time. 10 minutes later, she was there again. Same spot, same tilt of the head. At this point, I was breathing heavy and gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to look. I just wanted off that road. Eventually, I saw lights ahead, a small gas station with a diner attached. I pulled in, parked under the canopy, and rushed inside. The place was empty except for an old woman behind the register.
You alright, hun? She asked.
I nodded, then shook my head. There's a woman out there, in a dress. I've passed her 3 times. Same woman.
She didn't look surprised, just said, "Orange?" She's been around a long time, the woman said. They say she was hit by a truck decades ago. Driver didn't stop. Folks see her when they're alone, when they're tired. She walks the woods at night, looking for the truck that killed her.
That was enough for me. I grabbed a coffee, sat in the cab for a bit, and tried to gather myself. After an hour, I decided to keep moving, just wanted to get clear of that stretch. 10 miles down the road, my headlights flickered. Then my engine sputtered. I pulled off, cursing, and popped the hood. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, crunching gravel. I turned, and there she was, closer than before. Head still tilted, eyes locked on mine. I slammed the hood and floored it, engine coughing to life just in time. I didn't stop until I reached the next town. That was 4 years ago. I haven't taken that route since. I don't plan to, but every now and then, I'll see her in my dreams, standing by the road, barefoot, head tilted, waiting for a ride she'll never get. And I swear, sometimes when I pass tree lines at night, I catch a flash of orange, and I don't look twice. I was hauling animal feed through Kansas, cutting across rural roads near Salina, the kind of empty highway where you see more cornfields than cars, and the towns are just names on signs. It was around 4 a.m., and I was looking for a place to pull over and rest my eyes. That's when I saw the grain elevator. It stood like a monument on the horizon, tall, white, weathered. There was a small gravel lot beside it, big enough to park my rig. I figured I'd stop for a bit, stretch my legs. As I pulled in, my headlights swept across the side of the elevator, and that's when I saw him. A man in overalls and a white t-shirt standing just inside the open doorway. He looked like he belonged there, like a worker, but something was off. He didn't move when the lights hit him, just stood perfectly still, staring at the road. I honked lightly, gave a wave through the windshield. Nothing. No reaction. I parked the rig and stepped out, suddenly not feeling so tired anymore. "Hey," I called. "You all right?" He slowly turned his head, but didn't say anything. Just stared at me. His eyes were deep-set, dark, and expressionless. I remember thinking he looked dry, like paper. His skin had this pale, brittle look, like he'd been sitting out in the sun too long. "Just taking a break," I said, trying to ease the tension. Still nothing. After a moment, he stepped backward into the elevator, out of sight. I walked toward the doorway, peering in cautiously. It was empty. Completely. Just dust, shadows, and a few rusted tools on the ground. No man, nowhere to hide. Just a hollow concrete tube that echoed with every step I took. I backed out, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe he'd slipped past me somehow. I walked back to the truck, climbed into the cab, and decided to move on. As I turned the key, the headlights flicked on again, and this time he was standing at the edge of the cornfield, 20 yards away, facing me. No expression. No motion. Just watching. I didn't wait. I drove straight out of there, back onto the highway, heart pounding. I kept checking the mirrors for miles, expecting to see him pop up again in the dark. Later, I asked a guy at a fuel stop if he knew anything about that old grain elevator. He paused, then nodded slowly.
Used to be a mill there, he said. Back in the 70s, a worker fell into the grain chute. Got buried. They didn't find him for days. Shut the place down after that.
I asked what the guy looked like.
Overalls, pale, still.
That was enough for me. Now, every time I see a grain elevator in the distance, I get that same sick feeling in my gut. And I never ever stop near one at night. Because I don't think he was just watching. I think he was waiting. There's a way station off I-70 in eastern Colorado that most drivers pass without thinking twice. Small brick building, a couple of lanes, barely staffed at night. I used to stop there every trip until one night in 2021. It was just past 2 a.m. when I pulled in. The place was open, but no other rigs were in sight. The light above the scale was on, and the green arrow signaled me to enter. I rolled forward, stopped, and waited for the scale to register. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, raspy, almost like someone whispering through a fan, too heavy. I glanced at the monitor. It was blank. The voice came again, closer. He's too heavy. I leaned out the window. What was that? No answer. Just the wind brushing across the plains and the low hum of the scale. Then a knock on my passenger side door. I jumped so hard I hit my head on the ceiling. I whipped around, no one there. I climbed out, walked around the truck with a flashlight. The lot was empty. No cars, no officers, nothing. Just me and the building. I started to head for the office to see if someone was inside playing games, but as I got close, I noticed something strange. The windows were completely black. Not dark, black, like someone had painted over them. Still, I knocked. No answer. I turned the knob and the door creaked open. The interior was pitch dark, despite the overhead lights supposedly being on. I stepped 1 foot inside and instantly felt something was wrong. The air was thick, like I'd walked into a sealed room. It smelled musty, like wet carpet and rusted iron.
That's when I heard it again, whispering, but now it was all around me. He's still here, buried, never got out.
I backed out fast, heart racing, slammed the door, ran to my cab, and drove off the scale without waiting for the green light. I didn't care if I got a fine, I just needed distance. I didn't stop again until I reached Denver. Later that day, I told a buddy what happened. He got real quiet, then pulled up an article on his phone, showed me a news clipping from 1998. Apparently, a dot worker at that way station went missing during his shift. They searched the surrounding fields, the woods, even the drainage ditches. Never found him. A few years later, they redid the floor of the way station, poured new concrete after a collapse in the break room. Some folks believe they buried him without even realizing it. Now drivers report hearing whispers, seeing shadows move behind the glass, feeling watched as they idle on the scale. Some say he's still doing his job, still measuring weight, still trying to tell people something. Me? I don't stop there anymore. And if I ever have to, I keep the windows up, the doors locked, and I don't listen too close because sometimes the whispering sounds like it's coming from right under the tires. I was rolling through Montana on US 287, just north of Helena, around 1 a.m. The sky was pitch black, and the road was completely empty. No towns for miles, just stretches of dark highway and the distant shimmer of mountains. I turned on my CB to keep myself awake. Most channels were quiet. Then I flipped to channel 23 and heard static, then a voice. Breaker, anyone out there? It was a woman's voice, quiet, shaky. I replied, this is Dust Dog on 287. You okay? Long pause. Then he took the keys. I'm locked in. I can't get out. I asked her for a location, but all I got was sobbing and static. Something about a blue pickup and being stuck in a rest area. Then silence. I stayed on the channel, trying to coax more information. After a few minutes, a man's voice came on. She doesn't need your help. Chilled me to the core. I immediately reported it to Highway Patrol. Gave them my coordinates, channel number, everything. They said they'd check it out, but didn't sound too concerned. Then my CB started acting weird. Volume spiking, channels switching on their own. I turned it off. 15 minutes later, I saw something up ahead, a blue pickup on the shoulder, emergency lights blinking. The driver's door was open, no one inside. I slowed down but didn't stop, not after what I heard. A few miles later, I reached a truck stop, told the clerk about it, including the voice on the CB. He looked at me like I'd told him a ghost story.
That channel? He said. You heard her on 23? I nodded. He shook his head. Channel 23 is cursed. Been that way since a girl went missing 10 years ago. Last transmission was a plea for help. Said she was locked in a pickup at a rest stop. They never found her. I didn't say anything. He added, drivers still report hearing her, always around that stretch of 287, always on 23.
I turned my CB off that night and didn't touch it again for weeks. Some folks say you shouldn't respond when she calls, that she's stuck in a loop. Others say you invite something in when you answer, something that pretends to be her, until it's not. All I know is I won't use that channel anymore. And if I hear that voice again, crying for help, I'll keep the radio off and both eyes on the road. I was on a long, overnight haul through New Mexico, somewhere off I-10 near Lordsburg. I stopped at one of those old travel centers, not a Love's or Flying J, but a real rundown place. Flickering signs, dusty pumps, a half-lit diner attached. It was around 3:30 a.m., and my stomach had been acting up. Figured I'd use the restroom before grabbing a coffee. The place was empty, just one sleepy-looking cashier behind the counter who barely looked up as I walked past. The men's room was at the far end, past some broken slot machines. Inside, it was dead silent. One of the fluorescent lights was flickering, and only 2 of the 3 stalls had doors. I took the far stall and sat down. A couple minutes in, I heard the restroom door creak open. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. They walked to the stall next to mine, the one without a door, and stopped. I expected to see someone's feet, but there were none. I leaned slightly to check again. Still nothing.
Then a whisper, "You shouldn't be here." It came from the empty stall.
I froze. My blood ran cold. "Excuse me?" I said. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks on the divider between the stalls. I stood up fast, heart pounding, yanked my pants up, burst out of the stall, no one there. The restroom was empty. I checked under all the doors, even peeked outside. Nothing. I was alone. Trying to calm myself down, I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror. That's when I saw something behind me. A face. Pale. Sunken eyes. Thin lips. Just for a second, I spun around. No one. I bolted out and went straight to the counter. Told the cashier someone was messing around in the bathroom.
He just stared at me. "You used the back stall, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed. "We tell folks not to. Some listen, most don't." Then he told me the story.
10 years ago, a trucker came through during a snowstorm. He used the bathroom, had a heart attack in the far stall. Wasn't found until the next morning. People say he still lingers. Doesn't like company.
"He talks sometimes," the clerk said, "but mostly he just watches."
Needless to say, I didn't stay for coffee. Now, whenever I stop at unfamiliar truck stops, especially the older ones, I check the restroom stalls before I do anything. And if one doesn't have a door, I don't use it. It was a stretch of highway in Texas I'd driven 100 times before, long, flat, and forgettable. But something about the area around mile marker 212 had always made me uneasy. I didn't know why, just a gut thing. Then one night, that stretch gave me a reason. I was hauling auto parts to San Antonio, cruising through around 3:15 a.m. when I saw a car on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. I slowed down out of instinct. There was a man standing next to the driver's side door, waving me down with one arm. I rolled down my window and called out, "You all right?" He didn't answer, just pointed toward the front of the car, then motioned like he wanted me to stop. I pulled over a few yards ahead, threw on my flashers, and got out. As I approached, I called out again. Still nothing. He just stood there, head down, pointing. But here's the thing. As I got within 20 feet, I realized he wasn't moving at all. His arms stayed outstretched. His fingers didn't twitch. Not even his clothes rippled in the breeze. He looked frozen. I stopped in my tracks. Then I noticed the car. It was spotless, like showroom spotless. No license plates, no dust, no grime, not even a speck on the windshield. That's when I knew something was wrong. I backed away slowly, not turning around until I was at my truck steps. I climbed in and locked the doors. As I pulled back onto the road, I glanced in the mirror. He was gone. So was the car. I was shaken but tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Long hours, stress, whatever. But when I hit the next truck stop, I mentioned it to the guy working the counter. When I said mile marker 212, he gave me a look like I'd just said a curse word.
"You saw the stalled car?" he asked quietly. I nodded.
He told me there had been an accident on that stretch 5 years ago. A man in a black sedan had pulled over, trying to flag down help. A distracted trucker didn't see him and, well, you can imagine. Since then, there had been dozens of sightings. Same car, same man, always pointing, always silent, and always gone by the time anyone got close. Some truckers who stopped said they lost time. One guy said his dashcam footage went static for 20 minutes. Another said he touched the man's shoulder and felt like he was grabbing cold steel. The locals call it the ghost of 212. Highway Patrol won't log it anymore. They just say avoid that mile at night. I drive a different route now. Adds 45 minutes to my haul, but I don't care. Because whatever I saw that night wasn't alive. And if you ever drive down that road and see a man waving near a pristine black car, keep moving. He's not asking for help. He's asking for you. I was parked at a truck stop outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It was late, around 1:30 a.m., and I was dead tired. I had a few hours to kill before I could unload at my next stop, so I figured I'd catch some Chudier in the sleeper. The lot was quiet. A few rigs idling, some guys walking back from the diner, but mostly dark and still. I climbed into the bunk, shut the curtains, and dozed off almost instantly. Maybe an hour later I woke up to the sound of soft knocking. Not at the driver's door, not the window. From inside the cab, 3 gentle taps. Then silence. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I listened, nothing. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. I laid back down, then I heard it again, tap, 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 and this time it was followed by a faint whisper. Are you awake? I froze. I pulled back the curtain and looked around the cab. Nothing. Checked the lock, still sealed. No sign of forced entry. I even checked under the bed and in the side compartments. Empty. Trying to calm myself down, I turned on the dome light, cracked a bottle of water, and sat there a minute. Everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A handprint on the inside of the rear window. Small, smudged, as if someone had leaned there from the inside. I wiped it off and got out of the truck. Did a full walk around, nothing suspicious. Just my rig, parked under a flickering floodlight. I debated sleeping again, but decided I'd feel safer in the diner. I grabbed my keys, locked the cab, and started walking.
That's when a man, maybe in his 60s, grizzled, long-haul type, called out to me from his truck 2 spots over. You hear her too? He asked, as if he already knew. I stopped. Hear who? He nodded at my truck. The little girl shows up in sleeper cabs. You hear tapping, whispering. Sometimes feel someone crawl into the bunk. He wasn't joking. He told me he first encountered her 15 years ago. Different truck, different state, but the same thing. The knocking, the voice, the handprint. Said he'd met maybe a dozen other drivers over the years who'd had the exact same experience. Always a girl, always the bunk, always asking the same thing. Are you awake? I asked who she was. He shook his head. No one knows. Maybe a runaway, maybe something else, but she doesn't leave a trace, just memory.
I didn't sleep that night. I left the lot early and drove till sunrise. Weeks later, I found a thread online, a forum for truckers sharing strange encounters. A dozen posts titled Sleeper Cab Girl, all the same story. Some said she appears when you're too tired to drive. Some believe she's a warning. Others think she's just lonely. Me? I still don't know. But every night before I climb into the bunk, I check the back window for smudges. And if I ever hear that knock again, I won't answer. I've worked as a radiology tech for 6 years now, mostly night shifts. Quiet hours, fewer patients, and less chaos. But every so often, something happens that reminds you hospitals are never really empty. This happened about a year ago, during an overnight shift at a teaching hospital in Illinois. I was alone in the imaging department, which is in the basement. No windows, long hallways, lots of flickering lights, the kind of place that feels creepy even on a normal night. It was a Wednesday, and we'd had 2 late ER patients, both chest x-rays. After that, things went silent. I was sitting in the reading room eating a bag of pretzels, watching an old episode of House, when I heard the chime from the main imaging hallway. It sounded like someone entering the area. That wasn't too unusual. Sometimes nurses or doctors cut through our wing. But when I glanced at the monitor, it didn't show any motion detected. We had a cheap system installed that lights up whenever someone passes the sensors. I figured it must have glitched, so I got up to check. The hallway was completely still. The overhead fluorescence buzzed slightly, but nothing else. Then I heard it again, the sound of bare feet slapping on tile, just past CT room 2. Slow, uneven, like someone limping. Hello? I called out, expecting maybe a patient wandered in, but no response. Just the faint squeak of something wet touching the floor. I rounded the corner slowly and saw the imprint of a bare foot near the CT bay. Just one. No puddle. No trail. Just a single print pointing toward the equipment room. I grabbed my radio. Security, this is radiology. Anyone else down here?
Static. Then a voice crackled through. Negative. You're alone on sub-level 1 tonight.
I decided to double-check. I opened the door to the CT control room empty. The scanner was off, the chair pushed in, but on the monitor was a scan I hadn't taken. It was an axial head CT. File name, 0, Noid. I opened it. No data, no patient name, no history, just slices of a human head and something else. Something wrong. The skull was cracked, but not from trauma. It looked twisted as if grown that way. Then the image shifted. The slices began playing in reverse, like a flipbook of someone's skull reforming. I stared, mouth open, and then the screen went black. Suddenly, the scanner whirred to life. It turned on by itself. The internal lights activated. The gantry rotated slightly, like it was prepping for a patient. But there was no one inside. I backed out of the room and locked the door. I radioed again. Something's wrong with CT. I need someone to come down. No reply. I turned around and the hallway was dark. The lights behind me had shut off in a straight line. Click. 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 The darkness followed like a wave. I ran. I don't care how it looked. I sprinted down the hall, past MRI, past the locker room, until I hit the stairwell. The exit door was stuck. I pulled, yanked nothing. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Getting closer. Then a voice, whispering, "Do you see me now?" I turned, heart pounding. There was a figure standing just where the light stopped, barefoot, gown torn, face blurred like a corrupted photo. I slammed my fist on the emergency release bar. It finally gave way. I ran up 3 flights to the ER level, burst through the double doors, and collapsed near the triage desk. Security checked the basement. Nothing. No footprints. No activity on the badge scanners. They said the scan I mentioned didn't exist, not on any drive. But later, I checked the logs myself. The system recorded a scan at 2:11 a.m. That time matched. But it was labeled RAD, error, no image, just static. I asked around. One of the older techs finally told me, CT room 2? That was where they scanned a Jane Doe years ago. She came in unresponsive. They tried everything, but she coded in the scanner. No ID, no family. They say her face was wrong, like she'd been dead a long time. They stored the images, but the files always glitched. I switched shifts after that. No more nights. But that's not the only story. When you work as an ICU nurse on night shift, you get used to death. It becomes part of the routine, just another checkbox. But I'll never forget the night the code cart rolled itself down the hall. It was just past 3 a.m. I was reviewing charts near the med room when I heard the rattling. At first, I thought it was a crash cart from the ER, but our unit had only one, and it hadn't moved in hours. I peeked out the door. Down the hallway, under the dim emergency lights, I saw it. The code cart rolling slowly toward room 11. No one pushing it. No slope. Just moving. The wheels creaked like a shopping cart in an abandoned store. As it reached room 11, it stopped completely. I walked over cautiously, touched it. It was cold, unnaturally cold. I looked into room 11. Empty. That room hadn't had a patient in 3 weeks since Mr. Yeager passed away. I checked the cart's logs. It was locked. The crash cart in our hospital is alarmed if it's opened or moved without clearance. It logs the badge. There were no entries. No one had opened it. No one had touched it. I called down to Central. They said no other unit had accessed our cart. I told Charge. She brushed it off. Probably a tech messing around. But the night nurse sitting next to me whispered, "Room 11's been acting weird all week. Lights flickering, call bells going off, staff hearing coughing from the empty room. Someone even said they found a heart monitor showing a rhythm despite no patient being there." The next night, I watched the hallway camera feed at 3 a.m. The crash cart moved again. No one in frame. Just wheels spinning. It stopped again at room 11. I checked the room after. This time, the bed was rumpled, like someone had laid in it. The call light was flashing. We unplugged the call system to reset it, but the cord had been yanked from the wall, not loose yanked. Later that night, another nurse swore she saw someone standing in the room, tall, thin, wearing a hospital gown. But when she entered, it was empty. The ward became tense. Staff started refusing to do rounds alone. Charge finally requested a room blessing from the chaplain. The chaplain arrived. As he walked toward the room, the fire alarm in room 11 went off. It was disconnected, no smoke, just the siren. The chaplain did a simple prayer. After that, things calmed down. But the crash cart was moved to the other end of the unit. A week later, during my shift, we had a code blue in room 9. I ran for the cart, but it wasn't there. It had rolled itself again right back to room 11. I grabbed it anyway. We saved the patient. But as I pushed it back, I noticed something wedged behind one of the drawers. It was an old ID badge, faded. I wiped it off. The name read, Jaeger Charles, ICU, volunteer. Date 1989. I brought it to HR. They said he'd died on shift, cardiac arrest, found slumped over that very cart. No one knew why the badge would show up there. That model of crash cart didn't even exist back then. Since then, the cart sometimes ends up in front of other rooms, but it always returns to 11. Staff have stopped questioning it. Some even whisper, "Thanks, Charlie," when they use it. And it always works flawlessly, never out of stock, never fails. We don't explain it. We don't try to. But no one ever sleeps in room 11 anymore. I used to work overnight security in a hospital parking garage, the kind with 5 levels, security cameras, and a reputation for being haunted, according to the nurses. I didn't buy that. I figured most of the stories came from tired staff and bad lighting, but that changed one night in late November. Around 2:40 a.m., I was doing my standard sweep. Level 4 had a couple of abandoned staff cars. I walked past row C and saw a red sedan idling, engine on, lights off. I approached, tapped the glass. No response. The windows were tinted, but I saw the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. "Security," I said. "You okay in there?" Nothing. I tried the door. Locked. Then, suddenly, the engine cut off. The headlights flashed once, then total silence. The interior light came on for a second, just long enough for me to see inside. The seat was empty. I stepped back, checked my surroundings, radioed the desk. Possible vehicle issue on level 4, row C. Can someone run the plates? No response. I checked my phone, no signal. Weird, but it happens on upper decks sometimes. I walked to the car again, placed my flashlight on the windshield, and that's when I saw it. A handprint. From the inside, small, like a child's, pressed hard enough to fog the glass. Then I heard the sound of keys jingling, but not mine, from under the car. I crouched, nothing there. When I stood up, the driver's door was slightly ajar. I'd swear it had been locked a second ago. I opened it fully. The car was empty. No signs of anyone. But on the dashboard was an old visitor badge. The date on it, April 3, 2006. The name Emily H. That hit me hard. I remembered the name. Emily was a teenage girl who went missing from the hospital nearly 20 years ago. Her parents said she was waiting in the parking garage after visiting hours. She was never seen again. I backed away, heart racing. Suddenly, the car's radio turned on by itself. Static, then a child's voice. "I'm still here." I slammed the door shut and ran to the stairs. As I hit level 3, all the garage lights cut out at once. Total blackness. I used my phone flashlight to navigate to the office. When I got there, the cameras were offline, all except one. The feed for row C, level 4, was still running. On the screen, the red sedan, and standing next to it, a faint white figure. Long hair, hospital gown. She stared into the camera, then slowly turned and opened the passenger door and vanished. The next day, I checked the lot. The red sedan was gone. No record of it entering or exiting, but that visitor badge? Still in my desk drawer. No matter how many times I throw it away, it comes back. I quit that job 2 weeks later, and now I never park above the second level. Ever. But last week, I got a message on our internal system, an auto-generated ping from CT Room 2. The subject line read, "New scan available." I clicked it. There was no image. Just a single message. "You see me now." I closed my laptop and walked away. But the radiologist working that shift said later that night, the scanner turned on by itself again. He thought it was just a glitch until he found a wet footprint next to the table. It's been months, and we still can't explain it. But one thing's certain. Something is using that scanner. Something that doesn't show up on the monitors until it wants to. And it's always after hours. If you work nights, you start to see the pattern. Machines that beep for no reason. Beds that warm without patience. Footsteps that never arrive. But it's the cart that gets me. Because it moves with purpose. It shows up when needed and disappears when feared. I've seen a lot in this job. Codes, deaths, miracles. But nothing like that. If you're ever on shift and the code cart rolls up to you on its own, take a breath. It means someone's watching out, even if they've been gone for decades. Story 1. The woods behind our cabin. Have you ever heard someone whisper your name when no one was around? Not in a horror movie sense, no creepy soundtrack, no jump scare, just silence, and then your name, almost too soft to notice. That happened to me the summer before I turned 18. I still can't explain it. I don't talk about it much anymore, but I'll tell you what happened. Because even now, years later, I still don't sleep with the windows open. My family owns a small lake cabin in northern Michigan. It's been in the family for years, a basic wooden structure with no internet, no cell service, and barely any electricity. It's surrounded by thick forest on all sides except the front, which faces the lake. We went there every summer for 2 weeks, just to disconnect. It was peaceful, even boring. Until that year, in 2018, it was just me, my cousin Logan, and my Uncle Dave. Logan was my age, and we'd grown up going to the cabin together. That summer, we were given more freedom. We'd take the canoe out late at night, build fires, explore deeper into the woods than we were usually allowed. It was supposed to be a rite of passage before senior year. One night, Logan came up with the idea to camp out in the woods behind the cabin. Not just near the edge, he meant deep in, past the point where the trees thinned and it got dark even in the day. My uncle wasn't thrilled, but he trusted us. We packed flashlights, sleeping bags, trail mix, and 2 walkie-talkies, no tents. We thought that made it more legit. We hiked out around 7 p.m. By 8:30, we'd found a flat patch surrounded by pines and set up camp. The air was still, and the temperature dropped fast. I remember how silent everything was. No crickets, no birds, just the occasional rustle of wind. By 10 p.m., the fire we built had mostly died down, and we lay on our backs watching the trees sway above us. That's when I heard it. It was a whisper, faint, barely audible. "Jared." I sat up. Logan was already looking at me. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It said your name." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Uncle Dave on the walkie. We both grabbed our radios. They were on. No static. No clicks. "Uncle Dave, you there?" I said. Silence. "Probably nothing," Logan mumbled, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Around midnight, we were still awake, just staring into the dying fire. That's when the second whisper came, this time louder. "Jared, come here." It sounded like a woman's voice. Soft, gentle, almost like someone singing under their breath. Logan's face drained of color. "Nope," he said. "Nope, I'm not doing this. Let's go back." I wanted to agree, but something stopped me. Not bravery, more like curiosity. Or stupidity. I told him to wait. I stood and shined my flashlight toward where the voice had come from. Trees. Nothing but dark, unmoving trees. Then something moved. Not an animal. Not a person. It was like the trees themselves shifted, or like something big passed behind them. The light caught a glimpse of something pale. That's when the walkie-talkie crackled. "Boys? You there?" It was Uncle Dave. His voice sounded panicked. "I just saw someone near the cabin," he said. "Thought it was one of you, but they ran into the woods." Logan and I looked at each other. Neither of us had left the clearing. "We're still out here," I said. Long pause. Then, "Get back now." We didn't argue. We packed up fast. Logan kept his flashlight aimed behind us as we walked. Every few seconds, I swore I heard twigs snap just beyond the light's reach. Halfway back, the whisper came again, but this time, it was right behind us. "Jared." I spun around. No one. But Logan screamed. I turned to see him staring up into the trees. "Did you see that?" he said, breathless. Something was in the tree. We ran, tripped, fell, kept running. When we got back to the cabin, Uncle Dave was waiting on the porch with a hunting rifle. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "I saw her," he whispered. She was standing by the shed. I thought it was a neighbor. But when I called out, she ran. Fast, not like a person should be able to. We locked all the doors. None of us slept. The next day, we packed up early. On the drive back to the city, Logan didn't speak once. It's been years. I've looked into urban legends, forest spirits, missing persons. I found nothing that matches. Except once, on a Reddit thread, I saw someone mention the Whisper Woman, a figure people hear calling them in the woods. Always at night, always by name. I didn't reply, but I've never gone back to that cabin, because sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I still hear her. Story 2. The Drive. In Incident. The summer after I graduated high school, I worked part-time at an old-fashioned drive. In theater in rural Tennessee. It was the kind of place that still used analog projectors and sold popcorn out of a trailer that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Most nights were uneventful families, couples, small groups of teenagers drinking warm beer in pickup trucks. But that one Saturday night in late July changed everything. We were screening a double feature, a new horror film followed by a classic slasher. The place was packed. I was on cleanup duty with my coworker Rachel, and we had a good system. We'd wait until the second film started, then make rounds to pick up trash without bothering the guests. Around 10:30, the first movie ended, and we took a breather before heading out with garbage bags and flashlights. It was a clear night, warm with just the faintest breeze. The parking field was pitch black between the screen and the concession stand, lit only by the screen's glow and a few flickering overhead lamps. We were maybe halfway through the lot when I noticed something strange. A car parked way in the back, way past where we let people set up. It was an old blue sedan, rusty, with no visible occupants. "Was that there earlier?" I asked Rachel. She shook her head. "I don't think so. It's way out of the zone." I told her to keep going while I checked it out. As I got closer, I noticed the windows were rolled up, but the engine was off. The car looked abandoned, but I still called out, "Hello, drive, in's up there. You're not supposed to park this far out." No response. I got closer, maybe 5 feet away, and shined my flashlight inside. The back seat was empty. But in the front passenger seat, there was a mannequin. At least, that's what I thought at first. It was wearing a faded floral dress, head turned away. It looked plastic, unnaturally still, pale. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about it just felt off. Then it turned its head. I jumped back so fast, I dropped the flashlight. It didn't make any noise, didn't move otherwise, just rotated its head slowly and looked at me. Its eyes didn't reflect the light like human eyes should. I backed away and nearly ran into Rachel, who had come back to check on me. "What the hell?" she whispered. "Someone's in there," I whispered back. "But I don't think they're right." Rachel wanted to call the manager, but our radios weren't working. The signal always cut out in the backfield. We decided to walk to the front, fast. But as we turned around, we heard a car door slam. We spun around. The passenger side door was now wide open, and the figure, mannequin or not, was gone. I swept the lot with my flashlight. Nothing. Then Rachel gasped and pointed. There, near the tree line behind the field, we saw the figure again. It was standing perfectly still between two trees, just watching. We didn't wait around. We ran back to the concession trailer and told our manager, Eric. He laughed at first until he saw we weren't kidding. He grabbed his flashlight and came with us. When we got back to the car, it was gone. No tracks, no sound, just empty grass where it had been parked. Eric searched the perimeter with his own light, even went into the woods a few steps, but found nothing. He told us it was probably some crackhead or weirdo trying to scare us. But here's the thing. The next night, we were doing inventory around midnight. The drive-in was closed, no guests, just a skeleton crew locking up. Rachel screamed from the projection booth. I ran up the stairs, and when I got there, she was staring out the window. The same blue sedan was parked in the backfield again, empty. We never saw anyone leave it, never saw it arrive. We didn't go check it out this time. We called the sheriff's department, and they sent a deputy, but by the time he arrived, the car was gone again. I quit a week later. Rachel left the same day I did. 3 months later, I got a text from her in the middle of the night. All it said was, it was parked outside my apartment. She moved the next week. I haven't spoken to her since. Every summer, I still check the news for stories about that car. I've never found anything, but sometimes I dream about it. That figure, the slow turn of its head, and those eyes that didn't blink, didn't shine, didn't look human. And I wonder where it'll show up next. Story 3. The Lake Cabin Stranger. It was the summer of 2019 when I spent a weekend alone at my grandparents' lake cabin. I'd just turned 21, and they offered it to me as a sort of peaceful birthday getaway. No work, no noise, just time to decompress. The cabin was in upstate New York, on a quiet lake with maybe 3 other houses scattered along the shoreline. Most of them were seasonal and empty that early in June. The first night was perfect. I grilled some food, listened to music, took a swim in the warm lake water, and fell asleep in the hammock on the back deck. No one around for miles. It felt like paradise. The second night, that's when it changed. I'd spent the day hiking and swimming again. By sunset, I was beat. I ate leftovers, showered, and curled up on the couch to read. Around 10 p.m., I shut off the lights and went to bed, all the windows open to let in the summer breeze. I woke up at 7 a.m., not because of a nightmare or because I was uncomfortable, but because someone was knocking on the front door. Soft, deliberate knocking. I froze. My first thought was that maybe one of the neighbors needed help, but then I remembered those other houses were empty. I hadn't seen a soul in 2 days. I stayed still for a few seconds, trying to listen. The knocking came again. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and moved toward the hallway. The front door had a small window, but from where I was standing, I couldn't see anything. I thought about calling the police, but there was no signal out there, and no landline in the cabin. I tiptoed to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Then, I slowly crept to the front window, staying low. I peeked through the curtain. There was a man standing on the porch. He wasn't trying to hide. He was just standing there, arms at his sides, facing the door. Not moving. wearing dark jeans, a pale t-shirt, and no shoes. No shoes. I ducked back, heart slamming in my chest. I waited, didn't breathe. Then the knocking started again. But this time, it was coming from the back door. I nearly screamed. I rushed to the kitchen and locked it, then ran through the house and locked every window and door I could. The knocks moved from door to window like he was circling the house. And then, silence. Nothing for at least 10 minutes. I didn't dare move. I crouched in the bathroom with the knife, back against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. Then I heard it, the creak of the front door opening. I was sure I had locked it. I remember locking it. I heard slow, deliberate footsteps on the wood floor, one after another. I held my breath. The sound stopped outside the bathroom. I clutched the knife, ready to stab at anything that moved. Then, a knock. From inside the house. On the bathroom door. Not loud, not urgent. Just that same soft, deliberate rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I almost blacked out from fear. Then I remembered something. The bathroom had a small window above the sink, too small for most people to fit through, but I didn't have a choice. I climbed onto the counter, pushed the window open, and wriggled out. I scraped my back and nearly broke my wrist landing on the gravel, but I was out. I sprinted barefoot to the edge of the woods and crouched in the dark, staring at the cabin. The front door was wide open, the lights were on, and a figure stood in the doorway, looking around slowly, like it was trying to decide where I'd gone. I stayed hidden until the sun came up. Then I ran into town 5 miles barefoot and called the police from a diner. When they got to the cabin, there was no one there. Nothing stolen. No signs of forced entry. All the windows were closed again. All the doors locked. Except the bathroom door. That one was wide open. They never found the man. No footprints, no tire marks, nothing. But later that summer, I found something behind the cabin. Under the porch, tucked into a dry corner, was a pair of worn, dirty shoes, men's size 12. I never went back. My grandparents sold the cabin that fall. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd opened that door, or waited just a few minutes longer. Sometimes I still hear that knock in my dreams. 3 soft taps. Pause. 3 more, and I always wake up at 3. 7 a.m. Have you ever stayed in a room that just felt wrong? Like the air was heavier? Like the shadows moved when you weren't looking? That's what cabin 716 was like. I'll never forget it, even if I want to. It was a 7-day Caribbean cruise I took last September, solo. I needed a break from work and life, and figured being out at sea would do the trick. I booked last minute and got a discounted stateroom. The agent paused when he saw the cabin number but didn't say anything, just handed me the keycard with a weird look on his face. Cabin 716 was midship, deck 7, starboard side. When I opened the door, the first thing that hit me was the smell, not foul, just stale, like someone had been in there for a long time without opening a window. But cruise rooms don't even have real windows, just thick portholes. The cabin was freezing, even though the thermostat was set to 72. I tried raising it, but the air stayed icy. Still, I was tired from travel, so I unpacked, took a shower, and laid down. That night, I had the worst sleep of my life. I kept waking up to the sound of what I thought was someone breathing, not heavy, just present, like someone was in the room with me. At one point, I sat up and looked around. The room was dark, but the porthole let in some moonlight. That's when I saw it, a silhouette, standing in the corner near the closet, perfectly still. My heart went into overdrive. I scrambled for the light, and the second it flicked on, it was gone. I told myself it was the towel hanging weird or my imagination playing tricks. But I knew better. The next day, I asked the room steward if anyone had ever complained about the room. He looked up from his cart and said, "You're in 716? I nodded. His face changed.
He leaned in and whispered, "If anything weird happens, just ask to move rooms, don't wait."
Weird? Like what? He looked over his shoulder, lowered his voice even more, and said,
Sometimes people hear knocking from the inside of the closet or see things in the mirror. Some even leave after the first night.
That made my stomach turn. I was planning to stay, maybe chalk it all up to nerves. But the second night was worse. I locked the closet door before bed. I know how stupid that sounds, but it made me feel better. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the distinct sound of the closet door handle jiggling, like someone trying to open it from the inside. I stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep. The sound stopped. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp taps from inside the closet. I bolted out of bed, heart pounding, and turned on every single light. The handle had stopped moving. I slowly approached the closet and unlocked it. Empty. Just my clothes, nothing else. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I marched to the guest services desk and demanded to be moved. The woman barely looked up when I gave her the room number. She said, "Let me check availability," and within minutes gave me a new room key without question. When I got to my new room, cabin 1122, I passed another crew member in the hallway and casually said, "Guess I wasn't the first to switch out of 716.
He gave me a sidelong glance and replied, "You'd be surprised how many people don't make it past night 2. I asked him why they even kept it in circulation. He shrugged and said, "Corporate doesn't care unless someone dies in there."
I froze. Wait, has someone? He just walked off. I tried Googling it later, but didn't find anything. Still, I think about that silhouette sometimes, how solid it looked, how it didn't vanish until the light hit it. Something was in that room, watching, waiting. I'll never take another cruise again. Have you ever heard the man overboard alarm on a cruise ship? It's not something most people ever experience. It's rare. And when it goes off, it sends a chill down your spine that you can't explain unless you've lived it. This happened in 2022, on a cruise from Miami to Cozumel. I was traveling with my girlfriend, Kelly, and her 2 friends. We'd been saving up for this trip for months, and everything about it was perfect, at least, until night 3. We were about 300 miles out at sea, no land in sight. It was 2:46 a.m. when the alarm jolted us awake. A shrill tone echoed through the ship's PA system, followed by an automated voice. "Man overboard, starboard side, man overboard." At first, I thought it was a drill, but the ship doesn't run drills at that time, and it wasn't followed by any instructions. We stepped outside onto the balcony of our stateroom and looked out into the black ocean. Searchlights were already sweeping the waves. You could see crew members running down the outer decks, radios crackling. Something real was happening. We stayed up for hours after that. The search continued until sunrise. We later heard through another guest that a passenger had fallen or jumped from deck 11. No one ever found them. The weird thing is, no one ever officially confirmed it. The ship's staff was tight-lipped. The captain made one announcement the next day, just saying they were investigating a security incident and thanking guests for their cooperation. That was it. But that's not where the story ends. That night, the night after the alarm, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I stepped out onto the balcony again. The ocean looked endless, just blackness. The air was thick and still, and then I heard it. From the water below, faint, but unmistakable, someone was calling for help. "Help! Help me!" I froze. It was a male voice, weak but clear. I leaned over the railing, scanning the water below. Nothing. I ran back inside and woke Kelly. She came out and listened, but the voice was gone. She thought I was overtired or maybe just shaken from the alarm. But I knew what I heard. The next night, I heard it again. Same time. Same voice. "Help. Please." This time, it sounded closer, like it was directly beneath our cabin. I wasn't imagining it. I recorded it on my phone, but when I played it back, there was nothing. Just the sound of ocean waves. That morning, I decided to talk to a crew member. I found a steward named Mateo, and I straight up asked, "Has anyone reported hearing voices from the water?"
He didn't answer right away. Just looked down, then said quietly, "You're in 1036, right? That's almost right above where it happened."
I asked him if they ever recovered the body.
He shook his head. No, and we've had issues ever since.
What kind of issues? I asked.
Mateo glanced around, made sure no one was nearby, and whispered, "Some guests in that part of the ship hear voices, always at night, always asking for help. Some even see someone floating in the water, waving, but when they go to report it, he's gone."
I felt sick. We changed rooms that day, but I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. Whoever he was still out there, or at least something was. On the last night of the cruise, I was walking back to our room from the buffet. Our new room was on deck 6 when I saw something that still haunts me. The hallway was empty, dimly lit. Ahead of me, I saw a man standing barefoot in a soaked white t-shirt and swim trunks. He was dripping wet, leaving puddles behind him on the carpet. His skin looked pale, his eyes vacant. He was just standing there, staring at the wall. I said, "Hey, are you okay?" But he didn't react. I took one step closer. He slowly turned to look at me. His lips parted like he was about to say something, and then, just like that, he vanished. No fade, no blink, just gone. I screamed and sprinted back to the room. Told Kelly everything. She believed me this time because she'd heard the voice herself the night before. We left a note in the anonymous comment box before disembarking. "Stop booking rooms above the area where the man fell. Someone is still out there." We never got a reply. Of course we didn't, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up with that voice echoing in my ears. "Help, please." You ever see something so out of place it makes your brain stall for a second, like your mind just refuses to process it? That's what happened when I found the door. A door that shouldn't have been there. A door that no one else seemed to see. I was on a transatlantic cruise from Barcelona to Miami. My company had paid for the trip as part of a long service reward. It was a massive ship, 15 decks, theaters, pools, a casino, basically, a floating city. I wasn't planning to do much except read, sleep, and maybe drink too much. It was on the 4th day when I got curious about something. I was reading the deck guide and noticed that deck 13 wasn't listed. It went straight from 12 to 14. Now, I know a lot of buildings skip 13 for superstitious reasons, but on a cruise ship, I figured it was just renumbered or maybe reserved for maintenance. But the weird thing was, the elevator panel did have a button for deck 13 sort of. The numbers were arranged vertically, and between 12 and 14, there was a blank, unlit button. No number, just a black plastic key. I thought it was maybe for crew access, but when I pressed it, nothing happened. No light. The elevator skipped it. Still, I couldn't let it go. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., I decided to walk down the stairwell instead. I figured maybe I could get a peek at whatever was between those two decks. Deck 12, fine, lights on, guests walking around. Deck 14, normal. But as I stepped between them, I noticed something strange. The landing between the two levels had a narrow side hallway, almost hidden. There was a short metal door, painted black, about 4 feet tall. You had to crouch to get through it. No sign, no handle, just a keyhole. I swear I stood there for 5 full minutes just staring at it. That door wasn't on any map. I decided to take a photo, but my phone froze. Just a black screen. Wouldn't turn on again until I walked back up to deck 14. The next day, I asked a crew member if the ship had a deck 13.
She laughed uncomfortably and said, "Of course not. Most cruise lines avoid it. Bad luck, you know."
I told her I found a door between 12 and 14. Her face changed.
She said, "You probably found a maintenance hatch."
I described the short black door. She didn't respond, just walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m. I went back. The hallway was empty, the lights dimmed for night mode. I took the stairwell back down, and sure enough, there it was. Only now, the door was open, just slightly ajar. A crack wide enough to see a faint red glow coming from inside. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped closer. The air was freezing, like walking into a meat locker. I crouched down and peeked in. It was a narrow hallway, lit by dim red bulbs, sloping downward. I couldn't see the end of it. But I heard something. Breathing. Slow. Heavy breathing. Not from the door. From behind me. I whipped around, nothing. The hallway was still empty. I turned back. The door was shut. No sound. No red light. Just a black metal door that now looked completely sealed, like it had never been open. I sprinted out of there and went straight to security. I told them everything: the hidden door, the red hallway, the breathing. They were polite, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Or maybe they did, and just couldn't say anything. When I asked if I could see the ship's blueprints, they flat out said no. The rest of the trip I avoided that part of the ship, but the night before we docked in Miami, I saw something I can't explain. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting out on the deck alone, just watching the water. I looked up toward the center of the ship and saw a figure standing behind a round porthole 2 decks above. I counted the decks. It was exactly where deck 13 would be. The figure didn't move, just stared. Then the porthole slowly fogged up as if something inside was breathing on the glass. I blinked and it was gone. I left the next day without telling anyone else, but I couldn't stop thinking about that hallway, the red glow, the door that only appeared at night. What's behind it? I don't want to know anymore. But if you're ever on a ship and notice the elevator has a blank button, don't press it. And for the love of God, don't open the door. I didn't believe in ghosts until I went on a cruise with one. It was supposed to be a celebratory trip. My younger sister, Anna, had just graduated, and our parents booked a week-long cruise for the family, me, Anna, and our mom. We boarded the ship in Fort Lauderdale and were bound for the Bahamas. Everything felt normal the first couple of days. Warm weather, cold drinks, laughter, the perfect escape. But on the third night, I noticed something strange. There was this girl, early 20s, pale, long black hair, who kept showing up in the background. I first saw her at the buffet, standing by the drink station, just staring at the soda machine without taking anything. I figured she was just zoning out. But then I saw her again that same night at the comedy club, seated at the very back, arms folded, eyes locked on the stage, not laughing, not smiling, just watching. Still, nothing weird. Until Anna noticed her too. We were lying out on deck 10 the next afternoon, soaking up the sun, when Anna leaned over and whispered, "That girl is following us." I looked up, confused. She nodded subtly toward the poolside bar. She was behind us in line earlier, then again at the elevator, now here. It was the same girl, pale, expressionless, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans despite the heat. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't with anyone, just standing behind a lifeguard chair, staring directly at us. That night, Anna asked Mom if she'd seen her, too. Mom said no, but her face darkened when we described the girl. "She sounds like someone I used to know," Mom said, avoiding eye contact. We tried to shrug it off, but it got worse. The next day, we went down to the photo gallery, the place where they hang up candid pictures taken by cruise photographers. There were rows and rows of pictures of people smiling, dancing, eating, all with that glossy cruise lighting. But in 3 separate photos of us, the girl was in the background, not standing, leaning. In one photo, she was behind Anna, leaning into frame with her face half visible. In another, she was crouched behind a table near where we sat, her eyes pointed straight at the lens. And in the third one, she was standing directly behind me, a faint grin on her face. We hadn't seen her in any of those moments, not once. It was like she was invisible until the photos were developed. We brought the photos to the guest services desk and asked who she was. The crew member scanned the barcodes and checked the passenger registry.
Then he said something that chilled me. "There's no one on board by that name, and she doesn't appear in the facial recognition system."
"But she's in these photos," I said, holding them out.
He just nodded. "Sometimes strange images show up."
I asked what that meant. He wouldn't explain. That night, Anna woke me up around 3 a.m., shaking. She was in our room. "What?" "She was standing over you while you slept." I sat up, panicked. The lights were off. I scrambled for the switch. Nothing. The power was out. The room was ice cold. And from the corner, we both heard it, a soft, gurgling breath. Anna screamed. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and flicked it on. The beam hit the wall. Then the corner. Empty. No one there. The lights came back on a few seconds later. We called security. They did a full sweep. Nothing. After that, we refused to sleep with the lights off. Mom didn't believe us, or said she didn't, but she started locking her cabin door at night after that. On the last day of the cruise, we were docked back in Fort Lauderdale, waiting to disembark. Anna and I were standing on the balcony, watching the crew move luggage onto the dock. That's when we saw her again. She was standing behind the glass door of a crew-only exit, just inside the ship. Her face was pressed to the glass, that same blank expression. No crew members acknowledged her. No one walked by her. And then, right before our eyes, she turned and walked back into the darkness of the ship. We left without saying anything to anyone. A few weeks later, Anna got curious and started digging online. She found a forum thread from 3 years earlier, someone asking if anyone else had seen a girl on that same ship. The description was identical. Dozens of replies followed, people describing a pale woman who appeared in photos, stared from doorways, or stood in cabins at night. No one knew her name. No one ever found a record of her being a guest. They just called her the passenger who wasn't there. For the past 3 nights, there's been a man in a black coat, standing perfectly still across the street from my apartment. I wouldn't think much of it. Except tonight, he smiled at me, and I live on the 5th floor. It started 4 nights ago. I was in my small 1-bedroom apartment, scrolling on my phone, the TV playing quietly in the background. I live in a decent neighborhood, not upscale, but safe enough that I've never been too paranoid. My apartment's on the 5th floor, with a window overlooking the street. That night, I got up to refill my drink and glanced out the window. Down on the sidewalk across the street, directly under the flickering orange street lamp, was a man. He was tall, maybe 6 feet or more, wearing a long black coat. His head was slightly tilted down, so I couldn't see his face clearly. At first, I thought maybe he was just waiting for a ride share or smoking a cigarette, but he wasn't moving. Not even a shift of weight, just standing there, staring in my direction. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he wasn't looking at me. Maybe there was something behind my building, but the way his head was angled, it felt wrong. Night 2. I had almost forgotten about him until the next night. Same time, around 11:30 p.m. I got up from my desk to stretch and instinctively glanced out the window. There he was again. Same spot, same black coat, same eerie stillness. Only this time I swear his head was tilted slightly further upward. I stood there for maybe a minute, just staring back. The street below was empty, except for him. Finally, I reached up and pulled my curtains shut. When I woke up the next morning, I convinced myself I had been overreacting. Maybe he was just some local who liked standing outside late at night. Still, I made a mental note to avoid walking alone after dark for a while. Night 3. This time, I wasn't even near the window when I saw him. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when my phone buzzed. My friend Emily had texted, "Are you okay?" I frowned and typed back, "Yeah? Why?" She sent a photo. It was taken from across the street from ground level. The picture was of my building, and in the center of my lit-up window, there I was, brushing my teeth. The timestamp was 11:36 p.m. Below her message, Emily had typed, "This guy just sent this to our group chat. Says he found it online. Do you know him?" My stomach dropped. I didn't recognize the username who posted it. No caption. Just my window. Me. I ran to the living room, yanked open the curtains. He was there. Still. Silent. Watching. By now, I was nervous every time the sun went down. I tried to tell myself not to look, but at 11:30 exactly, I gave in. And instantly wished I hadn't. He wasn't across the street anymore. He was standing in the alley directly below my window. Head tilted all the way back, looking straight at me. That's when I saw it, his smile. Wide, teeth bared, like he was enjoying this. I froze, backing slowly away from the window. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the latch. I didn't sleep at all. Every sound from outside made my skin crawl. At 2:00 a.m. I heard something. A slow, steady tapping. Not from the door, from the glass. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, but my words came out in a panic. I explained there was a man outside my apartment, possibly dangerous. As I spoke, I dared to look toward the window. The tapping stopped. And then, a shadow moved across the inside of my curtains. I screamed and ran to the front door, throwing it open just as two officers came jogging down the hall. I was sobbing, trying to explain, pointing toward the window. They searched the apartment, every room, every corner, empty. The window was locked, no sign of forced entry. But here's the part that's kept me awake since. One of the officers quietly pulled me aside before leaving.
He had a strange look on his face and asked, "Are you sure you live alone?" He nodded, but then added, "Because there were 2 mugs in your sink, and one of them was still warm."
Story 2. The cabin window. I woke up to the sound of breathing, slow, steady, and just outside the glass. The thing is, our cabin windows were on the 2nd floor. When my friends suggested a weekend getaway to a cabin in the woods, I didn't hesitate. We were all in our mid-20s, stuck in boring jobs, and needed a break. The place we found was perfect, rustic but with running water and electricity, surrounded by trees so thick it felt like the world ended at the driveway. It was the middle of October, and the air was already crisp. The cabin sat on a small hill with a wraparound porch, overlooking a narrow dirt road. Inside, it was cozy 2 floors, a small kitchen, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. My room faced the front, with a big square window that gave me a nice view of the forest. The first night, nothing felt off. We cooked dinner, played board games, and drank until our laughter echoed through the trees. It wasn't until the second night that something changed. Night 2. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Not snoring, not wind through the trees, but the slow, deliberate inhale and exhale of someone close by. I sat up in bed, blinking into the dark. My eyes landed on the window. The moonlight was bright enough to outline the glass, but the view beyond was pitch black. The breathing was louder now. I couldn't see anything at first, so I slid out of bed, moving slowly toward the window. My hands were clammy, my pulse pounding. Then I saw it. A face, right there, just inches from the glass. The features were wrong. The eyes too wide, the skin pale like wax, the mouth slightly open as if they'd been standing there for hours, just breathing. I stumbled backward, my hand hitting the wall with a thud. The face didn't move. I ran out of my room and down the hall to my friend Megan's room, banging on her door until she opened it, half asleep and irritated. I told her what I saw. She grabbed a flashlight, and we went back to my room together. The face was gone. I tried to laugh it off over breakfast, blaming it on dreams and too much wine. But Megan pointed out something I hadn't noticed. Our bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. There was no balcony, no ladder outside. Whoever or whatever had been at my window would have needed to climb the siding to get there. We decided to keep the curtains closed, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for that breathing. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard a soft tapping, tap, tap, tap. I pulled the curtain aside just a little. The face was back. This time, the mouth was stretched into an unnatural smile, and one hand was pressed flat against the glass, fingertips leaving streaks in the condensation. I yelled for the others, and they came running. But by the time they entered my room, the figure had vanished again. We were supposed to stay until Sunday, but after that, no one was comfortable sleeping upstairs. We all dragged our mattresses down to the living room and locked every door and window. At 4:00 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, pacing back and forth. I sat up, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, and saw movement through the living room window. Someone was standing just outside, swaying slightly as if they were trying to see in. Then, without warning, there was a loud thump upstairs. We froze. Another thump, louder this time. It was coming from my old bedroom.
How the hell did they get up there?
We didn't wait to find out. We grabbed our stuff, piled into the car, and drove away without looking back. A week later, The cabin's owner called me. She said the cleaning crew had found something in my bedroom on the inside of the glass. Handprints, dozens of them. And the streaks were from the inside. My phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m. with a motion alert from my home security camera. The thumbnail showed a man's face, staring directly into the lens. The problem was, I was 300 miles away. I live alone in a small suburban house, nothing fancy, but after a break-in attempt last year, I installed a decent home security system with motion-activated cameras. They cover my driveway, front porch, and backyard, all synced to my phone. I don't normally get alerts unless it's something harmless like the neighbor's cat wandering across my yard. But 3 weeks ago, I was staying in a hotel for a work conference out of state. That night, my phone lit up on the nightstand. It was 2:17 a.m., motion detected. Front porch camera half asleep. I tapped the notification. The live feed came up, showing nothing but my porch bathed in the pale glow of the motion light. I scanned the frame. Nothing. I told myself it was probably a moth flying too close to the sensor. Then I noticed the thumbnail preview of the alert, the frozen image it had captured the moment motion was detected. It wasn't empty. It showed a man's face, pressed right up against the lens, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he was mid-breath. His skin looked dirty, his hair stringy. I froze. If someone was that close to the camera, they'd have to be standing almost against my front door. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it could be a glitch, maybe even an old image resurfacing. But then my phone buzzed again. Motion detected, backyard camera. I switched to the live feed. This time I saw him, the same man, standing at the far end of my backyard, just beyond the motion light's reach. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the camera. And then, very slowly, he raised his hand and waved. My hands were shaking as I called the police, giving them my address and explaining I was out of town but someone was on my property. They said they'd send a unit to check. While I was still on the phone, another notification came through. Motion detected, living room camera. I don't have pets. I don't have roommates. The living room camera is inside. The live feed came up, and for a split second, I saw nothing. Then he walked into frame. Same clothes, same face. He looked around like he was examining the place, then walked out of view toward the hallway. The operator's voice in my ear was asking me questions, but I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on one thought. How did he get inside? 2 minutes later, I got one final alert. Motion detected. Bedroom camera. My bedroom. He was in there. He sat down on my bed, directly facing the camera, and leaned in so close, his eyes filled the frame. His mouth moved like he was whispering something, but there was no audio. Then, the feed cut to black. When the police finally arrived, they found my front door locked. No signs of forced entry. The house was empty, but the cameras were gone. Every single one. Except for the living room camera. It was lying on my bed, pointing at the pillow where my head would be. The library was empty when I closed up for the night except for the man in the far corner, who was still staring at me. I work part-time at a small-town public library. It's a quiet job, mostly checking out books and reshelving returns, but on Thursday nights, I'm the closer. The library shuts down at 8 p.m., but the building is huge, 2 floors, with old creaking wood and aisles that feel endless when you're the only one left. That night was slow. Around 7:45, I started doing my usual rounds, letting patrons know we were closing soon. Most left without issue. Except one man. He was sitting in the far corner on the second floor, back to the wall, a single lamp casting a circle of yellow light around him. He didn't have any books, no laptop, no phone, just sitting there, hands in his lap, eyes following me as I walked past. I told him we were closing in 15 minutes. He didn't reply. By 8:10, the place was empty, or so I thought. I locked the front doors and started turning off lights. That's when I heard it. Footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of that far corner. I froze halfway down the main aisle, my keys in hand. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed in the empty space. No answer. I climbed the stairs, each creak sounding deafening. The upstairs lights were still on in sections, casting deep shadows between the shelves. I walked to the back corner where I'd seen him before. Empty. But then, at the end of the aisle, I saw movement just ahead, ducking back behind the shelves. I started walking toward it, my heart thudding. The closer I got, the quieter it felt, like the air itself was holding its breath. When I turned the corner, nothing. I decided to check the restrooms before leaving. On the way, I passed the basement access door, one we keep locked at all times. That's when I noticed something. It was open, just a crack. And from the dark stairwell beyond, I heard breathing. Slow, measured. I backed away and called the police from behind the front desk. They told me to stay on the line until officers arrived. When the police searched the basement, they found signs someone had been living down there: a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, even a small lantern, and a notebook. It was filled with pages of writing, all in neat block letters. The first page read, "She's here every Thursday. I like watching her walk home." Story 5, The Hiker in the Trees. About an hour into my solo hike, I noticed a man standing between the trees. He didn't move, not even when I waved. I hike alone a lot. It's my way of clearing my head after stressful weeks at work. There's a trail about 45 minutes from my house that winds deep into the forest. No cell service, no noise, but birds and the crunch of dirt under your boots. That Saturday morning, I parked in the gravel lot and set out early. The air was crisp, the sunlight cutting through the leaves in gold streaks. About an hour in, I rounded a bend and saw him. A man, standing about 30 yards off the trail, between two pines. He was wearing a faded gray hoodie and jeans, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. His head was tilted slightly, like he was studying me. I stopped and waved, thinking maybe he was just another hiker. He didn't wave back. I kept walking, forcing myself not to stare. When I glanced back a minute later, he was gone. I figured he'd walked deeper into the woods, but then I noticed something strange. There hadn't been any sound. No crunch of leaves, no snapping twigs. Just nothing. Another half hour passed before I saw him again. This time, he was farther ahead, still off the trail, facing me. Only now, he was closer than before, maybe 15 yards away. I could see his face this time, expressionless. Not even blinking. The air felt colder in that spot. My steps quickened. At the 3-mile mark, I stopped for water. That's when I heard it. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it came from my left, deep in the trees. My eyes scanned the undergrowth. And there he was again. Closer. Same stance. Same tilt of the head. I turned back toward the trailhead, deciding to cut my hike short. My pace picked up to a near jog. Every so often, I glanced over my shoulder, and each time I saw him, always at the same distance, no matter how fast I walked, always just standing there, watching. When I finally reached the parking lot, my relief was short-lived. My car was the only one there. Except, it wasn't. There was another vehicle now, a rusted old sedan parked 2 spaces away. The man was sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, smiling. I didn't think anything of it the first night I stayed in room 409. But when I woke up at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of someone quietly trying my door handle, I knew something wasn't right. I was in town for work, a small rainy coastal town that barely looked like it belonged in this decade. My company booked me into the Bayview Inn, an old 3-story hotel that smelled faintly of salt water and mildew, the kind of place that still used brass keys instead of keycards. When I checked in, the receptionist, a woman in her 50s with deep crow's feet and a voice like she'd been smoking for 40 years, handed me my key without much small talk.
"Room 409, top floor, end of the hall," she said, sliding the key across the counter.
The hallway leading to my room was long and narrow, with faded blue carpet and dim wall sconces. My door was the last one before a window at the very end. When I stepped inside, the room smelled stale, Not dirty, just like no one had opened a window in years. That first night, I unpacked, called my wife, and fell asleep watching some mindless late-night TV. The sound woke me up, a faint metallic click, like the door handle turning. I froze. My heart started pounding in my ears. I sat up slowly, staring at the silhouette of the door and the faint light from the street lamp outside the window. The handle jiggled again, quietly, like someone was testing it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking a little. The sound stopped. Whoever it was didn't answer, just walked away. I heard slow, muffled footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway. I told myself it was probably housekeeping who'd accidentally come to the wrong room, but it was 2 a.m. That didn't make sense. Still, I managed to go back to sleep. The second night was worse. I'd been at a client dinner that ran late. When I finally got back to the hotel around 11, I noticed the lobby was empty, except for the receptionist from before. She gave me a strange look when I walked past, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. That night, I woke again at almost exactly the same time, 2:12 a.m. I don't know what stirred me, but my eyes opened just in time to see the shadow of 2 feet at the crack under my door. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The handle turned slow, deliberate. This time, I heard a faint, wet breathing on the other side. Not fast or panicked, just steady. I whispered, "Go away," before I could stop myself. The breathing paused. The shadow didn't move. Then, finally, the feet shifted, and I heard them walk away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. "Someone keeps trying to get into my room in the middle of the night," I told the receptionist.
Her eyes flicked up at me and her lips pressed into a tight line. "You're in 409?
"Yeah." She hesitated before saying, "There shouldn't be anyone on that floor but you."
I frowned. "What about the other rooms?" "They're closed for maintenance," she said, looking past me at the empty lobby. "If it happens again, call the front desk immediately."
The third night, I did something stupid. I set my phone to record audio before I went to bed, just to see if I could catch whatever it was. Sure enough, at exactly 2:11 a.m., the sound started. Slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway. My pulse spiked as they stopped right outside my door. The handle turned once, twice. Then there was a light tap against the wood. Not a knock. Just one soft touch, like someone laying their palm flat against it. I stayed perfectly still, gripping the handle of the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. Then, a voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was low and hoarse, right at the edge of the door. I was about to yell when the whispering stopped, replaced by a sound that made my skin crawl. A long, deliberate sniff, like whoever it was smelling the crack of the door. That was enough. The next morning, I went back to the desk and told the receptionist I wanted to switch rooms. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to say it.
"You're not the first," she said quietly. "But 409 isn't supposed to be rented out at all."
I stared at her. Then why was I put there?
Her eyes darted to the side. "It's complicated." When I pressed her, she shook her head. "It's an old building. Sometimes people linger. Just stay in your new room and you'll be fine."
I moved to the second floor. My new room was smaller, but I didn't care. That night, I finally felt like I'd be able to sleep. But at 2:15 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of footsteps, not in the hallway above me. Room 409 was directly overhead. And right before I turned on the light, I heard it. 3 slow, heavy knocks coming from the floor. Story 2. The gas station attendant. I was the only customer at that gas station. So when the attendant asked me, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" I realized he was afraid of something, and it wasn't me. It was almost midnight. I'd been driving cross-country for 14 hours and needed caffeine to keep me going. The glowing sign for a gas and go appeared out of nowhere along the empty highway, and I pulled in. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 90s. Buzzing fluorescent lights, 2 lonely pumps, and a convenience store with dusty shelves. The man behind the counter was in his 50s, wearing a faded red work shirt with a name tag that said Carl. He gave me a polite nod when I came in, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the glass doors every few seconds. I grabbed a coffee and some snacks and brought them to the counter. That's when he leaned forward slightly and asked, "Where are you headed?" "Seattle," I said, swiping my card. He hesitated before asking, "You traveling alone?" The question felt a little too personal, but I shrugged. "Yeah." Carl's eyes darted again toward the glass doors. "Well, you might want to get back on the road quick." I frowned. "Why?" He didn't answer, just handed me the receipt and said, "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" That's when my stomach tightened. I shook my head. "I'm fine." Carl gave me a long look like he was debating saying more, then quietly said, "Just don't talk to him." I had no idea what he meant, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me hard. My car was parked right in front of the store. Halfway there, I noticed the smell faint but distinct, like rotting meat. Then I saw movement. Someone was standing at the far end of the parking lot, in the shadow between two flickering streetlights. They weren't moving toward me, just standing there, facing me. At first, I thought it was a homeless guy, but something about the way they were standing was wrong. Perfectly still. Too still. I glanced back through the store's glass door. Carl was at the counter, watching me intently. His lips moved. He was mouthing something. "Get in the car." I unlocked my door and slid in, locking it behind me. When I looked back toward the figure, it was closer. I hadn't heard footsteps. They were just closer. The parking lot light flickered, and I caught a glimpse of the man's face, pale, gaunt, and smiling too wide. His clothes looked wet, hanging heavy on his frame. I turned the key, my hands shaking. As my headlights came on, the man tilted his head and started walking toward me. No, not walking, gliding. I threw the car into reverse and backed out fast. The figure stopped at the edge of the light, just watching me leave. I didn't slow down until I was back on the highway. My heart was still pounding when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text. No caller ID. Just 4 words. "You shouldn't have left." I didn't stop driving for another 80 miles. When I finally pulled into another gas station, I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing, the man, the smell, the text. But as I got out to pump gas, I froze. Across the lot, under a single flickering light, he was standing there. Same wet clothes. Same smile. And this time, he waved. Story 3. The man in the passenger seat. The first time I saw him, he was already in my car. The second time, he smiled. It was a little after 2 a.m. on a Friday in late October. I just finished my bartending shift at a place downtown and was walking to my car in the employee lot a few blocks away. The streets were empty, the air sharp with the kind of cold that makes your ears ache. My feet hurt, my eyes burned, and I was ready to collapse into bed. The lot was dark except for a single yellow streetlight buzzing above the far corner. My car, a 2010 Toyota Camry, was parked near the middle. I hit the unlock button on my key fob, saw the hazard lights blink, and then froze. Through the driver's side window, I saw him. A man. Sitting in the passenger seat. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I blinked hard, adjusted my angle. He didn't move. His head was tilted slightly, face turned toward me, but the darkness made it impossible to see details. My stomach knotted instantly. I took a step back. The only sound was the hum of the streetlight. My key fob was still in my hand. I pressed lock again, nothing. The Camry's lights didn't blink this time. That's when it hit me, my car was already unlocked. I started backing away, scanning the lot for anyone else. It was completely empty. When I looked back at the car, the passenger seat was empty. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe I'd seen my own reflection. Finally, I crept forward, phone in hand, flashlight ready. I shone it through the windows, nothing. The interior was exactly how I'd left it. My work bag on the back seat, an empty coffee cup in the holder. The doors were all unlocked. I checked the back seat twice before finally getting in. My hands shook as I locked the doors from the inside. When I started the engine, my headlights flared across the lot and lit up a man standing just outside the glow. Too far to make out clearly, but close enough to know it wasn't my imagination. I drove home fast, checking my mirrors the whole way. My apartment building's parking lot was empty. I ran upstairs, locked my door, and didn't sleep a second that night. The next morning, I told myself it had to have been some drunk who wandered into the wrong car. Creepy, sure, but not supernatural. Not dangerous. By my next shift, a few nights later, the memory had dulled. I parked in a different spot this time, under the streetlight. My shift ended just after 1 a.m., and I walked out with another bartender, Steph. We chatted until she got in her car, then I headed to mine. That's when I saw him again, not in the lot this time, not across the street. He was sitting in my passenger seat. This time, the glow from the streetlight lit his face pale, drawn tight like he hadn't eaten in days, and eyes that didn't blink. His hair was wet, clinging to his forehead. But the worst part was his mouth. He was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. His lips were stretched too far, exposing too much gum, teeth clenched together like he was holding something back. I stopped dead, my keys halfway to my hand. My breath turned to frost in front of me. I was about to run when his head twitched a tiny sudden jerk. And then his smile widened. I bolted, didn't look back. I ran straight to Steph's car and banged on the window. She jumped, rolled it down halfway.
What the hell?
There's a man in my car, I gasped. She turned to look, but when I did too, the passenger seat was empty. Again, I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. Steph insisted on walking me back, but of course there was no one there. Doors locked, no sign of forced entry. She thought I was overworked, maybe seeing things. But I knew what I'd seen. The third time wasn't in the parking lot. It was in my driveway. It had been a week since the last incident. I'd taken to checking the back seat every time I got in the car, locking the doors religiously, even while driving. I'd stopped telling people about it. No one believed me anyway. That Friday night, I pulled into my driveway around midnight. My porch light was on, my little apartment above the garage glowing warm and safe. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, scrolling my phone. When I glanced up into the rearview mirror, my heart stopped. He was sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't see him open the door. I didn't hear movement. He was just there. Same wet hair, same pale skin, same stretched, unnatural smile. But this time, he was looking directly at me in the mirror. I couldn't breathe. My hand went to the door handle, but I was frozen, torn between bolting and staying perfectly still. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and put one finger to his lips. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember running up the stairs to my apartment or slamming the door behind me. When I looked out the window a few seconds later, my car was empty. I moved out of that apartment within the month, sold the Camry too, but every now and then, when I'm stopped at a light at night, I'll glance over at the empty passenger seat and swear I can see a faint reflection of him, smiling just for me. Story 4. Under the Porch. The night I realized someone was living under my porch, I had already been hearing them for weeks. It started as small noises, a creak here, a scrape there. I told myself it was the house settling, maybe an opossum digging through leaves. But by the time I could hear breathing, I knew it was something else entirely. I live in a small one-story rental in a quiet neighborhood outside of town. No roommates, no pets. The porch is an old wooden structure built a foot or so off the ground, with just enough space underneath for raccoons, stray cats, or, apparently, people. The first real incident was a Thursday night in late September. I was sitting on my couch with the window cracked open, scrolling my phone, when I heard the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps on dry leaves. Coming from directly under me, I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped. For a good 30 seconds, I didn't move. Then, when I thought it was over, I heard a faint shh, 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 like someone dragging their fingers along the wood slats beneath the floor. I stood up and peered out the front window, but the darkness under the porch swallowed everything. Eventually, I convinced myself it was an animal. The sound had that uneven quality, like a four-legged creature. Still, I went outside with a flashlight and shined it through the gap at the base of the porch. Nothing. The noises continued every few nights, always after midnight, always under the porch. Sometimes it sounded like scratching, sometimes shuffling. Twice, I heard a weird, low humming, almost like someone singing under their breath. I even called my landlord about it, but he just told me to spray for pests and said the porch had been there since the 60s. It wasn't until the second week that I realized how wrong I'd been. It was 2 a.m., and I'd just gotten up for a glass of water. I'd left the kitchen window open, the one that faces the front yard. As I stood at the sink, I heard it breathing, not fast or panicked, slow, steady, human, and it was right outside the window. I froze, my hand still on the faucet. After a few seconds, the breathing stopped. Then I heard a whisper, 2 words, soft but unmistakable. I see you. I dropped my glass, water splashing across the counter. I ran to the front door, slammed it shut, and locked every window in the house. The rest of the night, I stayed in bed with the covers pulled up, listening for any sound. Every creak felt like it was coming from directly beneath me. In the morning, I went outside with my phone camera ready. At first glance, there was nothing, but when I crouched down and looked deeper under the porch, my stomach flipped. There was a pile of blankets in the far corner, a plastic grocery bag with food wrappers spilling out, and in the dirt, a dent where someone's head had clearly been resting. I backed away, already dialing the police. They came within 15 minutes. The officer crouched down, shined his flashlight, and shook his head. "Whoever was here is gone," he said. "Could be a squatter. We see it sometimes." They didn't find any ID, no personal belongings beyond the trash and bedding. The officer suggested I put up chicken wire or a skirt around the porch. That night, I barely slept. 3 days later, it happened again. This time, it was just after midnight. I'd shut all the windows, turned off the lights, and was lying in bed when I heard the faintest creak. From inside the house, I sat up, straining to hear. The sound was coming from the living room right above the section of porch where I'd found the blankets. It was followed by a slow, dragging step. Then, another. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and whispered to 911, giving my address. The operator told me to stay put and keep quiet. I listened as the footsteps moved closer to my bedroom door. Then they stopped. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds before I heard that same low humming. It was right outside my room. The front door burst open a minute later as 2 officers rushed in. I heard shouting, heavy footsteps, but when they reached my room, they were alone. They found no one inside. One of them went to check under the porch again while the other asked me questions. When the first officer came back, he was pale. "They're gone," he said quietly, "but they've been watching you." He handed me something wrapped in a latex glove. It was a disposable camera, half-used, the kind you have to develop. When the photos came back a week later, I almost threw up. Half of them were pictures of the underside of my porch. The other half were taken through my windows. Me on the couch, me sleeping, me in the kitchen, pouring water. The last photo was taken from my bedroom doorway. I moved out the next day. I don't know who was living under my porch, or how many nights they watched me without me knowing. But I do know one thing. If you ever hear breathing outside your window at night, don't assume you're alone. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of someone tapping on my hotel window. That wouldn't be strange if my room wasn't on the 12th floor. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. The tapping was light, like fingernails on glass, and it came in sets of 3. I sat up, groggy, my heart already picking up speed. The curtains were drawn, but the faint glow of the city seeped in around the edges. I stared at them for a solid minute, waiting for the sound again. Then it came. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch, even though there were no trees anywhere near this building. I reached for my phone, but before I could check the time again, something moved on the other side of the curtain, a shadow. I froze. The shape was human, but distorted like someone crouching, head tilted, pressing close to the glass. Every instinct told me not to touch the curtain. But I was alone in the room, hundreds of miles from home, and curiosity was eating me alive. I grabbed the curtain edge and yanked it open in one quick motion. Nothing, just the sprawling lights of the city below. My reflection in the glass. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was paranoid, and let the curtain fall back into place. But I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tap. 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 Only this time, when I opened the curtain, I swear I saw something, not a person exactly, but the impression of one. A faint smudge, like the oily outline a hand leaves on glass. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the cold pain beneath. That's when I noticed something impossible. The smudge was on the inside. I checked the lock on the window. It was secure. There was no balcony, no fire escape, just a sheer drop down 12 floors. I barely slept that night, and when I did, my dreams were filled with the sound of tapping. On the third night, I decided to stay awake and catch whoever or whatever was messing with me. I left the lights off, sat in the chair facing the window, and waited. Hours passed. The city outside dimmed as more buildings went dark. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw it. Not through the glass this time, but reflected inside the room, in the faint light from the street lamps. A figure crouched in the corner by the window. I spun around, heart pounding, but the corner was empty. When I looked back at the glass, the reflection was gone. I wanted to call the front desk, but I knew how it would sound. "Hi, I think there's a ghost in my window." So instead, I decided to leave the hotel the next day. I started packing around midnight. At 1:30 a.m., as I shoved clothes into my bag, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. I ignored it. Then from directly behind me, I heard the whisper. "Don't look." I turned anyway. The window was wide open. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because hotel security was banging on my door within minutes. They searched the room, the hallway, even the roof. No one was there. The window had no exterior ledge, no rope, no harness. When I checked out in the morning, the front desk clerk gave me a strange look.
"You were in 1214, right?"
I nodded. Her smile faded.
"That room's been vacant for months. We've had reports before. People say they hear someone tapping on the glass."
That was 3 weeks ago. I'm home now. My bedroom window is on the second floor, and there's a big maple tree right outside. But last night, at 3:17 a.m., I woke up to a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap.